we will be talking about what are we baking our polymer clay on. And I will show you a few tips. Number one, if you want to get a flat piece, because especially if it's thin, it will have the tendency to kind of curl in the oven. All you need to do is to place your piece between a tile, and to avoid the shininess from the tile, you will also use wax paper or even regular paper. You can get, I prefer to get these glass tiles or marble tiles. Avoid getting the regular ceramic tiles because they are not completely flat. And you can see you place your piece between two pieces of paper and then the whole deal between tiles and let it cool off like that. You can also use mirror tiles that you can work your piece on and then simply put it in the oven, so you won't have to handle it after you have worked on it. And that way you're avoiding fingerprints, fingernail nicks and all kinds of stuff. For that, you just place your sheet of polymer clay on the mirror tile. Make sure it is nice and flat. And then use your cutter. Remove the extra polymer clay. And don't worry too much about those edges, because I've said so many times it's just a couple swipes of sandpaper. But this will allow you to make beautiful rounded surfaces of the edge. And you can even work a little bit to bevel them at a 45 degrees angle, after which you just use your finger again to smooth out. Then come the spent light bulbs. These come in so many shapes and sizes. There's one thing that you have to pay attention to. If you want to do a completely round piece, first place your piece of your sheet of clay on the light bulb and then cut it, because if you try to first cut it and then put it on the light bulb, then you might deform it. Why I prefer to work with glass is because I can see from the other side if my polymer clay completely adhered to the base and if I don't have any kind of air bubbles. And once again, of course, you can smooth out your edge and you can bevel it. Now your main issue with the light bulb will be that when you try to put it in the oven, it starts rolling all over the place. So what do you do about it? Simple. You just get a piece of aluminum foil and then you fold it several times. Now how many times depends if it's a lightweight aluminum foil or not. And then you can try and do something like this, but it won't be very good. There is another way to place it like that, and that is, again, you fold your aluminum foil and then place two fingers and simply gather around. It depends a lot on the shape of the light bulb. And then place the light bulb a little bit off center. You can even pull the aluminum foil in a little bit more. If you want beads that are even more puffed up, get a smaller light bulb and do the same thing. Obviously, you first put your polymer clay on, then you cut, and here be careful what cutter you use and the size of the light bulb, because the cutter might be bigger than the light bulb. And then again, you cut your piece, remove the excess clay, remove the cutter, prettify your edge, bevel it if necessary, and then you will make a little support for your light bulb so it wouldn't start rolling around in the oven and deforming your piece. And it's pretty much almost the same as you do it for the other light bulb, and all light bulbs will require some kind of base. You can either do this And it depends on where on the light bulb your piece is. Or you can put it standing up by simply gathering the aluminum foil around the base of the light bulb. But again, depends on the size and on the shape. Then you can also use the bottom of soda cans. Just make sure that you cut all that bottom all the way down, and you might want to even file it a little bit because you don't want to get cut when you're putting your clay on or when you're trying to remove it. But I always have one pair of crappy scissors I get from the Family Dollar store that I use specially to cut this kind of stuff. And one more time, place your polymer clay sheet, then cut it, remove the excess clay, remove the cutter, and then smooth out the edge. And depending on how big you want your bead to be, you can use various sizes of round cutters, and this way you can replace the lentil bead baker that Scalpy has. For bracelets, your best bet is jars and tumblers as well. Try to keep, I generally gather these as I am using all kinds of canned foods. I even have some squarified ones for more unusual shapes of bangles, but try to get a few sizes so you can make bangles for all sizes of wrists. If you want to use tumblers, make sure that the tumbler is perfectly cylindrical because most of them are a little bit tapered towards the bottom. You can also use the jars to place pendants on if you want to give them a little bit of dimension. One thing to tell is that you need to clean them really good. If you have elements of the label being there, remnants of the label, you can use alcohol, or sometimes you need acetone. Now, of course, you will need something to prop your jar as well, and here it gets a little bit more complicated because if you already have your polymer clay all around the jar, you don't want the jar to touch the bottom of whatever you're baking, you know, the grill or whatever you're baking it on. But at the same time, most of the countertop ovens we use are not very tall, so if you try to put a jar in there, it might hit the top and the heating elements on the top, so you really want to have it laying down. So you will make two sleighs, one that would be on the bottom end of the jar and one that would be on the top of the jar, with the polymer clay line bangle being in the middle, and that way it will be lifted up from the level plane and it will not touch in any way, shape or form whatever is underneath. And I'm saying whatever because sometimes I do put a tile there, sometimes I do have a little ceramic casserole dish that helps with the tenting, but this way your jar will not move. Another solution is vases, and check your local thrift store because you can get for just cents a piece all kinds of shapes of vases, and you will place them the same exact way. And you can place your pendants if you want to give them more dimension, and all kinds of other things. You can use various things around the house. For beads, you can use old wind chime things, or you can even use toothpicks. And the way that you do it, you just make your bead. You place the toothpick, you poke the hole actually with the toothpick. When do I use toothpicks to bake my beads is essentially when I'm trying to put my beads on a cord that's a little bit thicker, like leather, suede, sometimes even sari ribbon. The only thing you need to make sure is that you rub it a little bit like that to make the hole a pinch larger than the toothpick. Otherwise, you might have issues removing your toothpick from inside the bead. If that happens, simply heat up the bead a little bit more and the toothpick will come out. Then to bake your beads themselves, just get some printing paper, fan it, and simply place your beads in between the folds, and you will be able to bake a lot of beads at the same time. There are also all kinds of weird shape glass objects or metal objects that can allow you to bake various shapes on them, and that's why I'm saying check your local thrift store, because you will get a lot of personalized stuff. For bowls, for making bowls, simply look around your house. You can of course buy some if you want, but they make beautiful baking blanks, and you can make your own smaller or larger bowls to keep stuff inside. For example, most of the time I use my little bowls to put all kinds of little tumbled gemstones in them. I think that they are a perfect way to keep them. For baking necklaces, you use a little bit larger bowls. That is a finding I found at the local Goodwill, and your necklaces will be baked perfectly there. You can use all kinds of other stuff, spoons for example. When we come to purchasing baking blanks, some of them might be a little bit more expensive, but what you have to think about is that it's an investment. If you have a good quality baking blank, that will stay with you and you'll bake dozens and dozens of stuff on it. And one of the most known, of course, is Tiny Pandora's Easy Cuffs, but you can find a ton of baking blanks on Amazon, some that have a texture, some that have no texture and are flat. But there is one thing here that you have to be very, very careful about, and that is the diameter of the bangle. If the product listed doesn't list any diameter, don't buy it. It's too small. Anything that's under 2.5 inches is too small. I have a very, very thin wrist, and you can see that these bracelets really cut into my wrist. If they are 2.5 inches or larger, they are just fine. And when it's a concave one, you look at the inside diameter. But look at the difference between this one that's like 2.25. I can barely put it on and take it off. And this one that it's also a 2.25 and it's very, very tight. This one as well is a 2.25 and I can barely move my hand. And that one is a 2.75. 2.75. They sit on my wrist perfectly. And the 2.5 also sits on my wrist very, very nice. For beads, Sculpey has this bead baking thing that's awesome to make lentil beads. Then you can use the stainless steel soap that normally it's used to remove your onion and garlic smell, and you can find it in heart shapes and all kinds of other shapes, and they can be cheaper or more expensive, but usually they're around $3 or $4 a piece. Then blanks for your necklaces. Here you really want to invest a little bit because you will be making a lot of these, and it's so much easier to work directly on the baking blank because you can do all kinds of things before removing it from the blank itself. And then all you have to do is to put some backing if it needs any kind of backing. And of course you can find textured ones and diversely shaped ones that will allow you to really use your imagination. Then when we're talking about boxes, what I recommend the most is biscuit cutters that come in all kinds of shapes, and regular cutters. If you can find some that are taller than normal, it's okay, but if you get tins that you use as baking blanks, make sure you can remove your clay from it. There are tons of other solutions for you to be able to bake your polymer clay. The thing that you need to keep in mind is, number one, that whatever you're baking your clay on has to be fire heat resistant, obviously. Number two, that it has to offer a solution for you to be able to remove the clay after it is baked. Otherwise, if you leave that base in, that is not anymore a baking blank, it is a coverable. Number three, remember that you don't have to spend a ton of money to get really interesting baking shapes that you can put your polymer clay on. And the more you look around, and as I said, Goodwill or any secondhand store is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for you to find really personalized baking blanks. But on the other hand, buying a good quality baking blank when you're making a more important amount of jewelry is indeed a good investment. I hope that you enjoyed this short presentation, and I will see you soon. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell button to be notified when I post a new video, and spread the word to your friends. Happy claying!